And I think that's part of what drives Trump toward this kind of neo-isolationist inclination. But that natural security that the United States enjoyed in the 19th century is not attainable today,
Yeah.
right? Because there are ballistic missiles and jet aircraft and the internet and
Hmm.
cyber attacks and pandemics and all kinds of other globalized challenges, climate change, right? And
Right.
so the idea that the United States can just draw up the bridge
Yeah.
and grab Canada and grab Greenland and live happily ever after is, to put it nicely, BS.
President Trump has been in his second term since January 20th, 2025. And whether you support his policies or not, a lot has happened since then, both domestically and in foreign policy. Since November 2025, foreign policy especially has ramped up. This is the journalism of everything, where we talk about a myriad of curiosities from politics to economics, religion, ethics, and science. I am Doree Smith, an independent journalist and host. Though the U.S. began smaller operations off the coast of Venezuela in August, it wasn't until the month of November that the buildup of naval forces was formally named Operation Southern Spear. The buildup was supposedly to counteract drug trafficking networks, though that just seemed to be the reason stated for public support and not the actual reason for the boat attacks and the U.S. naval presence. In December, the Trump administration declared Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro's government a foreign terrorist organization and began boarding and seizing crude oil tankers. On January 3rd, 2026, as Americans and Venezuelans were still recovering from New Year's hangovers, the U.S. bombed targets in Caracas, captured Maduro and his wife, and flew him out of the country to be prosecuted for narco-terrorism. Just 3 days later, just as Americans and Venezuelans started to adjust to the U.S. going into Venezuela to capture their president, Trump announced that he wanted to acquire Greenland, an idea he originally presented during his first term in 2019. Since then, there has been a lot of foreign policy activity as Trump attempts to pressure Denmark and NATO into striking a deal with him so the U.S. can own Greenland, including official meetings, threats of military action, and Trump's number one tactic, threats of tariffs toward any country within NATO that opposes his attempt to take Greenland for the U.S. As an average American, you can feel whiplash at Trump's foreign policy and might even wonder, does he know what he's doing? I keep myself well informed, and I often wonder this. I spoke to someone in the know about U.S. foreign policy about this, Dr. Charles Kupchan, who is a professor of international affairs at the School of Foreign Service and Government Department at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. He has also served as a foreign policy advisor in both the Clinton and Obama White Houses. We talk about Venezuela, Greenland, and what drives Trump's foreign policy decisions in his second term. Is it historical precedence from the 19th century or a kind of manifest destiny? Dr. Charles Kupchan is a professor of international affairs at Georgetown University's Edmund A. Walsh School of Foreign Service and a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. He has served at the highest levels of U.S. foreign policy, including as special assistant to the president and senior director for European affairs on the National Security Council in the Obama White House and previously in the Clinton administration, as well as on the State Department's policy planning staff. Dr. Kupchan is a leading scholar of international relations and global order and the author of several influential books: Isolationism, A History of America's Efforts to Shield Itself from the World, and No One's World, The West, The Rising Rest, and The Coming Global Turn. Anything you'd like to change or add?
All good.
All right. My research worked out. So I guess I kind of want to start. We're going to start kind of broad and then kind of go into specifically what's going on now. So, like we were talking about, we're kind of living in this world currently where it feels like every day something unexpected happens in foreign policy. President Trump's policies led to the bombing of boats off the coast of Venezuela for several months. And then on January 3rd, the US captured Venezuela President Nicolás Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, and brought him to the US for prosecution for narco-terrorism. And then the next day, President Trump began to talk again that he wanted to take over Greenland. And of course, as we were just talking about, persists with this idea. To kind of start our conversation off, how does President Trump's foreign policy differ now than compared to his first term?
Well, there's no question that Trump and his so-called America First doctrine represent a turning point, and that in many different respects, Trump has departed from what we call liberal internationalism, the sort of liberal rules-based order. We also call it Pax Americana that emerged after World War II. And Pax Americana, the liberal order, was based upon the idea that democracy and liberal principles would guide those states that were part of the system, that free trade would be a key element of the system, and that countries would tether themselves to each other through multilateral institutions, through partnerships, through alliances. And on all three of those fronts, Trump has really turned in a different direction. He really has said, I'm not really interested in democracy promotion. Mm-hmm. And especially in his second term, and this is less true of his first term, he's taken steps here in the United States that I think leave many people, myself included, worried about the future of American democracy. He's basically thrown free trade overboard and put tariffs on just about every country he can find. And he's a unilateralist. He doesn't believe in multilateral cooperation. He thinks that it should be America first, Germany first, China first, Russia first. If everybody just looks out for their own interests, we'll be fine. That's kind of how the world worked for many centuries, and we weren't fine. There were a lot of dead people and a lot of wars. And so this idea that countries can work together and attach each other attach to each other in the pursuit of common interests, that was pretty radical, and it worked. These changes are much more pronounced in term two than in term one, because what we're seeing now, I think, is the real Trump. In term one, we saw Trump hemmed in by Republican internationalists, by what Trump calls the deep state, by people like John Bolton and the Secretary of State, Mr. Pompeo, and others who really had a much more traditional view of America's role in the world, and they checked him. He didn't hire any of those people in the second term. The few Republican hawks that he did hire, he's fired since coming into office in the second term. I guess you could call Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, a traditional Republican hawk, but Rubio understands that he needs to do as he is told, or he will be unemployed. And so
Right.
what we're seeing now is in some ways America first on stilts, America
Mm.
first running on high test.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting.
and it is a rather arresting turn. The
Yeah.
one caveat I would offer is that number one, there isn't a clear strategic vision. There's a lot of incoherence.
Hmm.
It's not as if America First has a core set of principles and Trump is adhering to those principles on a day-to-day basis. He's not. He's all over the place.
Yeah.
And the other point I'd make is that I think what at the core of America First is a kind of neo-isolationist impulse.
Hmm.
Trump got elected in part by recognizing that many Americans felt that the United States was overreaching, right? That we
Yeah.
were spending trillions of dollars and expending blood and treasure, particularly in the Middle East, with nothing to show for it.
Yeah.
Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, all of them were fiascos.
Yeah.
And so Trump was like, we're done. We're not going to do this anymore. We're going to focus on our own problems and on our own backyard. And to some extent, he's doing that. He's resuscitating the Monroe Doctrine. We're going to flex our muscles in the Western Hemisphere. But if you look at the rest of the world, not a whole lot has changed.
Yeah.
NATO is still NATO. There are 80,000 troops in Europe. There are US troops in South Korea, in Japan, in other parts of the world. We've bombed Iran. We've bombed Iraq. We've bombed Syria. We've bombed Yemen, Somalia, Nigeria, Venezuela. So in some ways, the idea that somehow we're going to disentangle ourselves from the world, it ain't happening. And
Yeah.
I think in some ways what you see is Trump wishing that he could go back to the 19th century, wishing that he could pull up the drawbridge,
Yeah.
but realizing that he can't, and enjoying the chest thumping that comes with the assertive use of American military power.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people initially, when he campaigned on an America First policy, were thinking it was going to be a lot more isolationist. And then, with military, anytime you attack anyone, right, you've got military entanglements there. People still remember Afghanistan and Iraq and being there for so long. I mean, do you think he is straying for this, or do people misinterpret what he meant by America First?
I don't think people misinterpreted it.
Mhm.
I think that Trump would like to disentangle the United States. He sees alliances as encumbrances, right? He's looking at the war in Ukraine and the $68 billion package that Biden passed to arm Ukraine. And he's thinking, wait a minute, this is a country that's thousands of miles away. It has no direct bearing on American security. What are we doing here? What's going on?
Hmm.
And then he says, well, I'm going to end this war. And he calls his buddy Vladimir Putin and he says, hey, let's end this war. And Vladimir Putin says, Donald, you're right. I'm with you. Let's end this war. And he hangs up and he launches 800 drones that night
Right.
on
Yeah.
Ukraine. And Trump is like, well, wait a minute. This isn't going as I expected.
Yeah.
And so now, the US is still doing most of what it was doing before Trump came into office, with the exception of we're not sending the large amounts of money and the
Okay.
arms to Ukraine that we were, and the arms that we're sending, the Europeans are paying for. But the
Yeah.
one thing that I would say is that it's notable that all of these many operations that Trump has undertaken involve air power. They
Mm-hmm.
don't involve ground troops.
Yeah.
They don't involve the United States putting a lot of skin in the game.
Okay.
And I'm guessing that we're going to see more of that.
Yeah.
Trump doesn't want to occupy Venezuela.
Ah.
And that's one of the reasons that he left in place the Maduro regime without Maduro.
Oh.
Because
Okay.
I think he correctly understood that if he pulled down the regime, the United States would either be faced with a failure, a chaos, or long-term U.S. occupation.
Right. So we did learn from the Iraq occupation and stuff.
Yes,
I yeah. Um,
yes.
I served there from 2005 to 2006. Um, was lucky
In
enough to serve
Iraq?
in Iraq, in Erbil. So I was lucky to be in the northern Kurdish area, and I was embedded with Koreans who were there doing sort of a more humanitarian mission. And even though I wasn't in, danger every day, I realized, what are we doing here? What are we actually doing here? And so I think it took most Americans a little while longer to realize that lesson, but I just remember coming back going, what did I just do?
Well, you saw it firsthand.
Yeah, yeah,
And, the rest of us watched from afar,
right.
but it certainly looked like a fool's errand
Yeah,
to topple regimes in Afghanistan and Iraq and then assume that we were going to turn these countries into something resembling Ohio. Uh,
right.
wasn't going to
No,
happen.
no, no, definitely not. Definitely not. I know. I loved the Middle East, but yeah, it was nuts. um, so you mentioned previously, and I know you've written a lot about, and I've heard a lot about a lot of references to the Monroe Doctrine. And a lot of that is currently in relation to our involvement in Venezuela. And then it has been used many times throughout history to justify, especially involvement in Latin America. Do you think the Monroe Doctrine still applies today in this much more globalized kind of world, more entanglements and everything?
Well, the Monroe Doctrine was set forth in 1823,
Mm-hmm.
and it was intended to warn off European powers from recolonizing parts of Latin America that were breaking away from European empires. And it wasn't really implemented
Mm.
because the United States more or less stayed out of entanglements in Central and South America and in the Caribbean until the end of the 19th century. And
Okay.
in some ways, you could interpret the Spanish American War of 1898 as the delayed implementation of the Monroe Doctrine,
Mm.
because that's when the United States picked a war with Spain, kicked Spain out of Cuba and Puerto Rico, kicked Spain out of the Pacific, took over the Philippines, took over other islands in the Pacific, and really began to enforce the Monroe Doctrine. And
Mm-hmm.
then ever since, the US has more or less been the hegemon of the
Yeah.
Western Hemisphere.
Mm.
Sometimes with a heavier hand, sometimes with a lighter hand. But the Monroe Doctrine has more or less been in effect since 1898.
Hmm.
It's not really being reinstated by
Mm.
Trump, but Trump is highlighting it as a way of flexing his muscles and saying we can do as we see fit in the Western Hemisphere. And he's focusing much more on threats like immigration
Mm-hmm.
and drug trafficking as sort of top line national security issues, as opposed to previous presidents who generally focused on great power politics and Russia and Ukraine. Russia and China.
Mhm.
What I think is interesting about the kind of focus on the Monroe Doctrine is that the original vision of the Western Hemisphere dominated by the United States was also one in which the hemisphere was detached from the rest of the world.
Hmm.
And in fact, the America First Committee, which opened its doors in 1941, and this is where the America First name comes from,
Oh. Mhm.
was about hemispheric isolation. It was the
Oh.
United States should defend the Western Hemisphere from troubles in Europe and troubles in Asia. We stay out of World War II and we defend our hemisphere as an arsenal of democracy.
Hmm.
That's the word that FDR used.
Oh.
Now we've got this kind of weird thing where we're enforcing the Monroe Doctrine, but not practicing hemispheric isolation. As we
Right.
were talking about a few minutes ago, Trump is flexing his muscles here, and at the same time, there are U.S. troops strewn all over the world, and so it's this kind of odd mix. But I do think that in thinking about what Trump is doing, and thinking about Venezuela, and thinking about Greenland, the images, the narrative that come to my mind are very 19th century.
Hmm.
Right? Because it was in the 19th century that the United States engaged in very determined territorial expansion.
Hmm.
First across the Appalachians into what is now the Midwest, and then to the
Oh.
Pacific coast. And then we picked a war with Mexico in the 1840s and took about half of Mexico. We tried repeatedly to annex Canada. There was a
Oh, geez.
discussion about buying Greenland in 1867. We
Oh,
bought
right.
Alaska at the end of the Civil War. So in some ways, Trump is this is about manifest destiny
Hmm.
and not just the Monroe Doctrine. I
Oh,
think
interesting.
he look, he's a real estate developer. He's
Yeah.
looking at a map. He
Yeah.
sees this big island sitting off the coast of the United States and Canada, and it's like this should be ours.
Yeah.
I want that. And it's big, it represents about 25% of the continental United States.
Wow.
So, Trump probably would like to leave office saying, I added 25% of territory to the United States, and it's full of minerals, and now we control the Arctic and blah, blah,
Right.
blah.
But to the average American, I think it's like, what? Maybe it seems that like an interesting, maybe I'm wrong, an interesting disconnect between his foreign policy and his, domestic policy, because Americans kind of just want, your basic prices to go down, and a lot of people are upset about the immigration being so, enforcement it being so aggressive and all of that. So it's an interesting, do you think he just doesn't care, or I just, it's hard because I don't know any strategy like you were talking about. It's kind of can seem very random, but I don't know if it is or not.
Yeah.
you know
Um, I think it's important to distinguish between what Trump has done in Venezuela
Mhm.
and what he could do in Greenland.
Okay.
Because I don't think a lot of people in the United States have a lot of sympathy for Maduro.
Yeah.
And it ain't a terrible tragedy that this guy is now in prison.
Right.
Uh, I'd say Venezuela is better off. The United States we're all better off.
Okay.
Uh, Now that doesn't mean it was done legally. That doesn't
Right.
mean that I think it was a good idea,
Hmm.
but one can at least make a case for this.
Okay.
When it comes to Greenland and the prospect of an armed attack against a NATO ally, a fellow democracy, a country that has said, well, we don't want to be part of the United States, a country that is still part of Denmark, and Denmark says, well, we're not interested in selling you Greenland.
Hmm.
The idea that somehow we would coercively annex this territory, I don't think most Americans are going to feel very good about that.
Right.
And I think in some ways, Trump has kind of misread the American experience.
Hmm.
And this is a country that has from the very beginning had a self-appointed exceptionalist mission. We're here on planet Earth to make the world a better place, to
Yeah.
share the American experience, to spread democratic ideals and institutions. And Trump has basically abandoned that mission.
Hmm.
He is doing things on the immigration front that are very hard to watch.
Hmm.
I would say it is indecent and inhumane. I
Yeah.
would point out that two-thirds of the American public opposes his immigration policy.
Hmm.
Part of it is because it's indecent and inhumane. Part of it is also that it's causing a lot of disruption to labor markets, right?
Yeah.
Undocumented migrants staff the hospitality sector,
Hmm.
the farming sector, gardening and landscaping, food processing, construction,
Construction. Yeah.
right? A lot of companies are suffering, prices are going up.
Hmm.
And then Trump says, well, I might have to invade our democratic ally, Greenland.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think this is going to wash well. This is not going to
Yeah.
wear well. And then when you combine that with the affordability problem and the
Yeah.
reality that tariffs are not bringing manufacturing jobs back to the United States, but producing significant increases in prices.
Hmm.
Trump's own voter base, right? Working Americans without a college education, they're going to be very angry
Yeah.
and feel that they were misled by Trump. And yeah, I think we're beginning to see that. That's why I think
Yeah.
Trump's popularity is beginning to crater.
Yeah. It's I can't remember the last number, but I think it's in the 30s. I want to say it's like 38%. What I wonder, and you'd mentioned this too, it is this sort of idea of manifest destiny, and he is a real estate guy. Um, is it about acquisition of territory? Is it do you think it's for his own personal economic gain? Because he's pretty much unchecked at the moment. It doesn't mean that he will be, um, because other people have to be elected, other Republicans or whatever. But is this for his personal gain? Is this for a legacy? I don't know. It's hard to get into the man's head, but what do you think?
I mean, I would say it's all of the above.
Yeah.
Uh, there's no question that part of it is just hardcore resources,
Yeah.
right? I think the main reason he went into Venezuela is to get access to the largest oil reserves on planet Earth.
Hmm.
Now, is it going to work? Probably not,
Yeah.
because most U.S. oil companies are not ready to go back in to a country that is that unstable and corrupt with dilapidated infrastructure until they have assurance that if they invest X billion dollars, it will be a paying proposition. They have earnings reports and shareholders, and as a consequence, even though Trump called these CEOs into the White House recently, they were like, we're not jumping into the deep end.
Yeah.
In Greenland, do they have lots of rare earths and minerals? Yes, they do.
Hmm.
Are they accessible? No, they are not.
Okay.
Are they under very large packs of ice? Yes.
Mm.
Is there infrastructure? Is there a road network? No.
Oh,
Why are there not companies lining up to do mining in Greenland, which, after all, is open for business? Well,
mm.
they're not there because this is very hard to do and very expensive.
Yeah,
And so I think Trump is looking at these resources and he's saying, I want them, we need them. And he may be right, but the actual plan of implementation to get these resources is missing.
yeah, yeah.
Part of it is I think, he said this openly. I think it was an interview with the New York Times recently. Someone said, "Well, you can get all what you need from Greenland just by working with them. You have
Right.
bases, you have minerals, you got ships."
Hmm.
He said, "Well, ownership is psychologically important."
Yeah,
And I think you're hearing a guy who has spent his entire life buying property and developing property and owning hospitals, excuse me, hotels,
right,
and owning casinos and apartment buildings. And this is what he does. This
right.
is who he is. And
Yeah,
so he wants to own it.
yeah.
Um, and and then finally, is there some kind of strategic logic here? Yeah, the Arctic is of growing importance.
Okay.
But again, we have an agreement with Greenland that was formed in 1951. It's been updated. Whether it is tracking satellites or missiles launched from Russia, or monitoring what's called the Greenland, Iceland, UK gap, which is a choke point in the North Atlantic.
Okay.
We are already doing all of that.
Oh,
And
hmm.
so why we need to own Greenland when everything that we want to do is already happening, and owning it may require destroying the NATO alliance? Go figure.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, he's sort of had a grudge with NATO even from his first campaign. Said a lot of things about leaving NATO, and I know some of that was because he felt we were contributing financially more than anyone else and that sort of thing. So I wonder, he tends to be a grudge holder. Do you think some of it is that too, or is that maybe too simple of a explanation?
And I don't think there's a grudge here. I mean,
Yeah.
I think there is a certain antipathy to Europe
Mm, mm,
that comes from different sources. Part of and this is more J.D. Vance and the MAGA movement than it is Trump,
mm,
is, Europe is liberal, it's secular,
mm.
uh, and they haven't yet banished DEI, and J.D. Vance would like to see far right parties come to power. People
Mm.
who are religious and conservative and don't believe in gay marriage, and they go to church.
Right.
And so part of this is just this culture war that's
Ah,
taking place in the United States. For Trump, I think it's more that he sees the European Union as this bureaucratic Frankenstein that is infringing on national sovereignty and is over-regulating.
ah,
And also, attempting to undermine the American economy. I think that, and this is not without justification, they see Europeans as freeloading on the United States,
right.
right? That, our taxpayers are spending a lot of money on defense. German taxpayers are buying beer and bratwurst. Hey, that's not fair.
Right.
Uh, so there's a lot of stuff going on there.
Yeah.
But there's no question that there is this kind of antipathy toward Europe. And another part of it, and this goes back to the social issues, is immigration.
Yeah.
The national security strategy claimed that Europe was headed for quote unquote civilizational erasure. And what do they mean by that? It's its white Christian population is going to be replaced by dark-skinned Muslims.
Ah. Mhm.
And so this is the same kind of mantra that you hear in the United States about immigration.
Right. That's scary talk, though, honestly. But it's interesting because aren't there a lot of countries in Europe who have elected more right-wing representatives? Aren't they trending toward kind of a more right-wing in some of the European countries? Or
Yes,
yeah.
and what has happened here in the United States is now arriving in Europe.
Mm.
Right? We have in this country seen for the last several decades the hollowing out of the political center.
Mm. Yeah.
And Congress in particular, but also the public, has tended to veer. The right has gone further to the right, the left has gone further to the left. New Yorkers just elected a socialist, a Democrat, or a Democratic socialist
Right.
as mayor. And so that the center is weakening.
Right.
Europe's center, until recently, was holding.
Hmm.
But now it's also being depopulated.
Hmm.
In France, in Germany, in Italy, in Poland, in the UK, in Hungary, you already have some far right governments in Europe.
Yeah.
And so uh, this is one of those moments where we just don't know which way the pendulum is going to swing. Have
Yeah.
we seen far right populists in Europe peak, or are they still on the upswing?
Yeah.
And could it be that France and maybe Germany are run in the not too distant future by parties that look a lot like Trump's government and
Hmm.
MAGA?
Interesting.
We don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Whereas it feels in America, um, there might be a weakening of the right wing. Just, I think, in a reaction, honestly, I think a lot of people care about immigration as far as how it's being done right now, but I think generally Americans care about themselves and their own, little worlds. And if the economy does not improve, I think you're going to see possibly, a swing either to the center or more left, but who knows? Because
I mean, I agree with you, and it's already happening,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Republican members of Congress are starting to distance themselves from Trump.
Mm-hmm.
We had a small number of elections recently, but in both New Jersey and in Virginia, decisive victories by centrist Democrats for governor.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's where we're headed.
Right.
Does that mean the Democrats are definitely going to win the midterms and take the House? No.
No.
But the pendulum is going to be swinging in the other direction.
That'll be interesting for foreign policy if here we are, I think, stretched Venezuela, Greenland, Iran, possibly. There's, not sure what's going on there, but we'll see if we're kind of involved in some way in those places at midterms. I don't know. I don't know how the electorate will feel because once you're involved, it's hard to detach.
It's much easier to get in than it is to get out.
It is, especially, I mean, it's also something I think about. We do have an excellent military. We spend plenty on it, but also our soldiers are well trained. The whole military is well trained. So we're good at it. I don't personally believe we should use it everywhere, but it'll be, I don't know. I think Americans do still have a distaste for entanglements.
No, I agree with you. And it
Yeah.
really it stems from the reality that the United States has a privileged and unique geography,
Yes.
right? It was George Washington in his farewell address who said commercial connections with everybody, political connections with no one.
Mm.
Or in Thomas
Mm-hmm.
Jefferson's words, no entangling alliances, right? Big oceans on the east and west, relatively nice small neighbors to the north and south. That
Mm-hmm.
provides a certain natural security.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what drives Trump
Mm.
toward this kind of neo-isolationist inclination. But that natural security that the United States enjoyed in the 19th century is not attainable today,
Yeah.
right? Because there are ballistic missiles and jet aircraft and the internet and
Mm-hmm.
cyber attacks and pandemics and all kinds of other globalized challenges, climate change, right?
Right.
And so the idea that the United States can just draw up the bridge
Yeah.
and grab Canada and grab Greenland and live happily ever after is, to put it nicely, BS.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. I mean, I think we can learn from history, but sometimes I feel like maybe our policies are so drawn toward historical precedent that maybe doesn't apply today. I mean, you need some kind of guidepost, but our founders could have never imagined what this world looks like now, as far even if you just look at technology,
Yeah.
you
I
know.
mean, you ignore history, you're going to be in big trouble.
Absolutely.
But you can't misread history. The world changes, technology changes, political and social life changes. And so you got to be guided by history, but not held hostage to history.
Mm, that's a good
And
way.
I think in some ways that may be a good way of summarizing Trump.
Yeah.
You know, he's kind of stuck between this old vision of America,
Mm-hmm.
uh, the Monroe Doctrine, Western hemispheric isolationism, natural security. But then he wakes up in the morning and he lives in a globalized and interdependent world, and he doesn't know which way to turn.
Mm-hmm.
And that's in part why I think we see an approach to global politics that is very jerky,
Mm-hmm.
unpredictable, incoherent. And I think it's going to stay that way for the next 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you there. Well, one last question, since I promised only an hour for you. Um, how do you predict that Trump's foreign policy is going to influence United States relations with the rest of the world moving forward? And I mean, we don't know what he's going to do the next 3 years. Um, when he's done being president, how is this going to impact us?
You know that there's no going back to the pre-Trump era.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things that are happening as we speak that are creating irreversible changes. In
Mm-hmm.
some ways, I would say the impact at home is more far-reaching than the impact abroad.
Hmm.
And that's in part because Trump is hemmed in abroad
Mm.
by the world, by global politics. Here inside the United States, especially because he controls both houses of Congress, there isn't a lot of checks on his power.
Yeah.
And so some of the things that he's doing on defunding basic research, uh, on changing the healthcare system and saying we don't need vaccines anymore. I mean, really kind of crazy stuff.
Yeah.
It's going to take a very long time to rebuild from the damage that's done. In terms of American foreign policy, I think it's a bit too soon to judge. And that's in part because I think allies are handling Trump well,
Mm.
right? They have every reason to walk away. They have every reason to throw up their arms and say, it was nice while it lasted, but our partnership with the United States has come to an end. Good night and good luck. But they're not doing that.
Yeah.
They're engaging Trump. Sometimes it's uncomfortable, but
Hmm.
they're staying in the game,
Yeah.
right? Just today, as you and I have been discussing Greenland,
Hmm.
the Danish foreign minister and the foreign minister of Greenland, they're in there talking to Vance and talking
Yeah.
to Rubio and trying to make
Yeah.
this work.
That's true.
And that's exactly what they should be doing. They should be playing the long game. They should wait Trump out
Mm.
because this won't last forever. And
Right.
hopefully, when this administration comes to an end, NATO will still be NATO.
Yeah.
There will still be a partnership with our democratic friends around the world. And it's possible if Trump delivers that we might actually have a better relationship with Russia and China,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
he's pragmatist. He's
Yeah.
transactional.
That's true.
If he can end the war in Ukraine, if he can get a trade deal with Xi Jinping, more power to him.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's
let's
true.
let this story play out.
Right.
Um, you know, as of today, January the 14th, you and I have reason to worry and have indigestion, but let's see where this story goes.
Yeah. Yeah. I know I'll be honest, I was a little surprised that Denmark and Greenland came to talks, but you're right. They need to be engaged because they can't just turn around and ignore a threat from the United States,
No, the
obviously.
downside risk is too high.
Yeah.
Those world leaders that have basically confronted Trump,
Hmm.
Lula in Brazil, Modi in India, hasn't gone over so well.
Yeah.
So I think, the best strategy is tell him you like him. Tell him he's
Right.
a good guy. Get in the room,
Yeah.
engage,
Yeah.
say yes, but
Right.
and try to keep him on side.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much for this. I really
Sure. No, I enjoyed the
appreciate it.
conversation. It's good to meet you.
I appreciate it. And, let's see what happens.
Stay tuned.
We're going to be busy. In just the few days since I spoke to Dr. Kupchan, several things happened between the US, Venezuela, and Greenland, and there will continue to be developments. On January 14th, which is the day I talked to Dr. Kupchan, the US Senate rejected a resolution that would have limited President Trump's ability to conduct any more military actions on Venezuela without congressional approval. Now, this is actually key because it actually looked like they were going to pass this. There were several Republicans that were going to vote for the resolution, but then at the last minute, they changed their minds. So it's basically saying that Congress and the Senate, they're not yet willing to put President Trump in check. Even if they had passed a resolution, though, most likely this would not have stopped Trump from making moves because honestly, he doesn't really care when these sort of things are put on him. He does it anyway. President Maduro's regime is still in charge of Venezuela with basically the government. His followers are still in charge of Venezuela, are still there. But Trump does say that we control their oil. Trump has escalated his rhetoric about acquiring Greenland, basically saying that the U.S. will take it either the easy way or the hard way. Trump announced that he will impose tariffs starting at 10% and up to 25% on European allies, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the UK, the Netherlands, and Finland that oppose the U.S. taking over Greenland. And he wants to take it by June. The EU and NATO have had emergency meetings over the weekend to decide what actions they will take to prevent a takeover by the United States. I will have future episodes on U.S. foreign policy as things are happening, so be sure to tune in. I also plan on addressing the ICE raids and aggression in Minneapolis, but I'll be honest, I haven't figured out how to cover it. I prefer to do deeper research and different looks at things, and I haven't figured out how to thoughtfully cover this topic. So I'm working on it. Please stay tuned. Thanks for listening and watching the Journalism of Everything. I am your host, Doris Smith. Please check out my YouTube channel for bonus content, extra research, and more upcoming expert interviews.